Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Rachel and this is Stitched Up. So today I'm doing another pattern review with you with my latest make, which is a bit of a dupe. I had this idea in my head that I wanted to recreate a dress or sort of a dupe of a dress from a designer that I absolutely adore, and that is Farm Rio. So if you haven't heard of them, they are, I would say, a mid to, well, not high end, they're not couture, but you know, sort of a mid-level high-end designer. And they have an online website with the most dreamy, stunningly beautiful dresses that I absolutely adore. The fabrics, the style of them, the prints are just insane, and I absolutely love them. But they are sadly outside of my price range for ready to wear. I mean, you know, I could bankrupt myself because I think nearly everything on their website I absolutely adore. I'm going to put a little bit of footage in here. And I had this idea that could I find a pattern and maybe some fabric, perhaps what's already in my stash, and recreate something along a similar vein from some of the beauties that I love on this website. And then lo and behold, I stumbled across this pattern, which is Vogue V2004. This pattern here. And my vision has come to life. So I haven't had much success with Vogue patterns in the past. I'm going to just say that right now. McCall's patterns fit me really well generally, but when I have attempted Vogue patterns in the past, I don't know if it's just the block that they use, they've never come out right at all. And yeah, it's just been one of those things, which is a real shame because lots of their patterns and their designs I really love. And I think, you know, with a little bit of imagination and you can get beyond what is on the pattern envelope, you can create something that's really beautiful. But yeah, it's just been a bit of a nightmare. So I've tended to steer away from their patterns for many a year, shall we say. But I just had this thing in my head that I really wanted to have a go at this. And so I searched the stash. I didn't buy anything new. And I've got this beautiful Vienna lawn, which is from Lady McElroy. So basically what this is it's a very fine viscose lawn, almost a voile weight, but it has these beautiful metallic flecks in it running through the fabric, which just elevates it, gives it a little bit of a little bit of glam, little bit of glitter. It's really, really nice. And I had about 5 meters of this fabric in my stash that I bought when I went to the Festival of Quilts about 3.5 years ago. I think it was 3 years ago, something like that. And I bought it there and it's sat in my stash ever since. And I even considered destashing it. Glad I haven't. But I thought this is going to work really well for this pattern, and I got to work. I've made it and I love it. It's beautiful. So let me just tell you a little bit about the pattern first, and then I can tell you how I found the process and what I think to my beautiful dream summer dress. I'm going to be looking at my off camera while I just look at the notes I've made because I want to make sure that I don't miss anything out for you. So please forgive me for that. But this is a fully lined dress. So it does take a bit of work. It's not a dress that you can just throw up in a couple of hours. And I know I am quite a fast sewer. But yeah, this took me about a week to make altogether, little bits here and there, kept coming back to it, etc, etc. But yeah, the bodice and the skirt is fully lined, which makes sense because the fabric choices that you should use for this pattern are really quite fine fabrics. So it recommends things like chiffon, crepe, georgette, very lightweight linens, voiles, those kinds of fabrics. And that's really right because you want the flowiness of it, you want the drape, and because it's fully lined as well and it's quite a big dress, you don't want it super heavy, especially if you are making this for summer. It's fitted through the bust and it has raglan sleeves, which are quite balloony as well. So they're quite loose, and then they come into a cuff, whether that is elbow length or wrist length, because you've got two views for this pattern. It has a front button and bias loop closure, a invisible back zipper. It has pockets, but obviously you can leave those out if you want. And it has an hook and eye closure at the back. It does have this collar, And I will say, I mean, we'll talk about it more as I talk through my thoughts on the finished garment. I do feel it just, because the collar sticks up and it's designed to do that, but I feel it just feels a bit, I don't know, a bit sort of loose and not really defined. I don't know. But anyway, we'll come to that a little bit later. Comes in two views. You have a sort of just below the knee length view with the elbow length sleeves, or you've got the full shebang, the full maxi length version with sleeves that go down to the wrist, and it has a continuous lap cuff finishing with more buttons and bias loops on that as well. I've gone for a bit of a hybrid between the two versions. So I've gone for the long version, but with the elbow length sleeves, because I think that's going to work really well for me spring and summer in the UK. And I just love a maxi dress in summer. It's my favourite, and it's really giving me those Farm Rio vibes. I've had to put my glasses on for this bit because I didn't write this bit down, but it comes in sizes 8 to 26, which is a bust of 31.5 to 48 inches, a waist of 24 to 41, and a hip of 33.5 to 50 inches. So I appreciate it's not fully size inclusive, you know, certainly not what we see through a lot of the indie brands, but you know, it's a fairly decent size range, I guess. Now, I fell into the size 14 size range. So the 14 is a bust of 36, waist of 28, and a bust of hip, of 38 inches. My measurements are a bust of 36, waist of 28, so I hit the size 14 in those two measurements, but my hips are 44, so they are 6 inches bigger than the hip size of the size 14. However, the finished measurements of that are a bust of 40, waist of 30.5, and a hip of 56.5, because once you get to the skirt part of this pattern, the skirt is gathered, both the lining and the overskirt is gathered. You've got a tier at the bottom, and yes, you've got quite a lot of volume there, so it's not so much of an issue. So I decided just to go with the straight size 14. Now, I appreciate that gives me a good 3.5 inches of ease around the bust, but and I know that this is supposed to be fitted around the bust, but I actually wanted it loose. I was looking more for the sort of boho feel and vibe with this pattern, and I didn't want it really tight around my bust. The only place I wanted it nipped in was around my waist. I just felt having a looser fit through the bust with the volume in the sleeves and the volume in the skirt, but having that nipped in waist would be the kind of vibe that I wanted for this pattern and resulting dress. So that's what I decided to go with, which would then give me a good couple of inches of ease around the bust, and it's worked out really well. So the other interesting part to this pattern is that you can use trims as well. So if you've got loads of trims lying around in your stash, then it might be an opportunity to have a play with pattern and trim matching. I mean, I have tons of trims in my stash and I never get to use them, so I was really keen to have a go at that. And if you look at some of the Farm Rio dresses, a lot of those use those kinds of accents to their garments as well, which really just takes it up a notch, and it's not something we get the opportunity to do much, I think, in sewing. So I was really keen to do that. Now, what I will say is that to make the full length dress, you are going to need 12 yards of trim, so that can work out quite expensive dependent on where you get your trim from. I had this gorgeous sort of crochet trim in my stash. It's like an ivory colour that I got from a seller called Miss Chloe. Now, she's originally found her on Facebook, I think, and she'd got like a little Shopify website, but very much a small independent seller. Sold a few fabrics, but primarily her shop was full of trims, buttons, zips, that kind of thing, and a lot of it is really sort of vintage stuff, end of line. It's really sad that she isn't around anymore, and that's really sad because she has just the most amazing stuff that I never found anywhere else. And she would sell things in bulk lots really inexpensively. So I had tons of this stuff in my stash. I think I must have bought about, I don't know, 15 meters of it, something like that, for about £5. It was ridiculously inexpensive. And I had more than enough to obviously use it on this dress in every area that the instructions recommended to place it. So I decided to use this gorgeous fabric and trim, match them together, thought they would work really, really well, and I am so delighted with my choice. I think it's worked super well. So the fabric choice that I went with is this Vienna Lawn by Lady McElroy. I'll stand up and show you. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous lawn. As I say, it's got these beautiful flecks of metallic sort of rose gold throughout. I don't know if it's rose gold actually, it might just be gold, but yeah, throughout the fabric. And it's got a sort of pictorial view of lemons and trees, and there's a door there. I can't remember the name of this particular design. If I turn around I can show you the design of the fabric, but it's just so summery and beautiful, and I just thought, yeah, it's just going to work so well. Now I've really searched far and wide. I've even done a Google reverse image search to see if I can find this fabric, but it looks like they don't have it at the moment. Now, the thing with Lady McElroy is they bring out these prints, they print them on different bases, and then they take them off for a few years and then they redo them. So I'm sure at some point it will come out again. But yeah, this particular design is not available to buy at the moment, very sadly, but they do have some other really, really beautiful Vienna lawns, which would work just as well for this particular pattern and to get that Farm Rio vibe. There's a couple that I'll put in here that I would really love to recreate another version of this dress in. Please excuse if you can hear my husband in the garden. We're still renovating the sewing room outside, and yeah, he's doing a bit of drilling, so sorry about that. But anyway, needs must, I need to get this done today. So yes, I'm super happy with the matching of the fabric, pattern and trim. I think the whole thing comes together really, really well. So let me just tell you a little bit more about how I found the making up of this pattern. The instructions actually were super straightforward. There were no particular problems at all. It's, you know, it's a raglan sleeved bodice. You create a collar, and it's just a two-piece sort of one, when I say one-piece collar, as in it's got a front and back facing, and it's got some little gathering just into the collar at the front here, which obviously gives you the ease over the bust. There is no gathering in the waist. It has waist darts and back darts, and then you've got to repeat the process with the lining for the top, and then you add the skirt basically. So it's a fairly straightforward pattern to put together, but it is quite time consuming because obviously you are in essence making two dresses, because you're doing the whole thing again with the lining. Apart from the sleeves are not lined. So you add the trim after you've completed each step, if that makes sense. So you've got trim all around the collar, which is added once the collar is fully constructed and sewn onto the dress. You also have trim around the front neckline. You've got these button loops down the front. I did add an extra one, which I will explain why I did that in a minute. The buttons I ended up using are Pigeon Wishes ones. Now, I did want to do self-covered buttons, but I had a go at it, and I found, because this fabric is so fine, because it's a voile, it just wasn't working. So I abandoned that idea and then hunted the stash, and I found these Pigeon Wishes ones in my stash, which I think work really, really well. So I've just gone with those. It would have been nice to have self-covered buttons. I think that would have just been the icing on the cake, if I'm honest. But yeah, it just wasn't working in this fabric. I haven't had much practice with self-covered buttons over the years. It's not something that I've done much at all, I guess, and I think that's probably because I've not made this type of garments that I've needed to use them for. But I think it's something that I need to practice a lot more, definitely, because I don't find it easy, even with the button maker things that you get. I think I've got yeah, I've got one of these things, and yeah, it just wasn't working for me at all in this fabric because it's so fine. But I think that these buttons work well, so I'm happy with my choice at the end of the day. So you have the trim that goes around the waist as well, and also around the sleeves, and then with the skirt at the bottom You also have it between the end of the skirt and the ruffle, which you can see there. You'll see some better photos of it because I'm going to put some better images in at the end of this video for you to have a proper look at how the dress moves and all that kind of thing. So I would say the only part of the instructions that I struggled with was, bizarrely, when you create the lining for the skirt. So it tells you at step 21, which is the part where you join the front and back lining pieces, skirt lining pieces together, and then it tells you to do a gathering stitch around the top where the waist is. Straightforward. So I did that, and then the next step tells you to gather it up slightly, and then to attach the lining, the skirt lining, to the outer skirt, wrong sides together, and then put another gathering stitch in through all the thicknesses and then gather it up. But it doesn't work because the skirt lining and the skirt waist circumference is exactly the same size without any gathering. So I don't understand why it tells you to gather the skirt lining, because that makes the waist circumference too small to then attach it to the waist of the actual skirt itself. So I ended up having to just take the gathering out. I don't know why it does that. Yeah, anyway, so that was the only error I found in the instructions. Everything else was absolutely straightforward. The other thing that I haven't done as well is it tells you that you use a hook and eye closure. Now, the hook and eye closure is for the back of the collar here, and I haven't put it on. And the reason for that is because I tend to find I just don't like hooks and eyes around my neck, because I find that it ends up, if you've got long hair, your hair, ends up catching in your hair all the time and ripping your hair, and it drives me up the wall. So any pattern that I come across where it has like a zip in the back and tells you to put hook and eye closure at the top, I tend to ignore that and just put the zip all the way up to the top. Haven't done that with this because of the way the collar is, and I think probably it would have been better if I had just joined up the collar at the back completely using the zip. I think that would have been better, but it's the first time I've made this dress, so I think if I made it again, which I probably would, to be honest, because it's a lovely dress, I would put the zip all the way up to the top of the collar at the back. And I think maybe that's why it is just flapping around a bit, which is just a bit annoying, but it's something I can live with at the end of the day. So I did need to make some adjustments to the size 14 that I went with, because I always do with any pattern that I make, because I am 5'10" and most patterns are just not drafted for my height. So the adjustments I made were that I lengthened the sleeve by 1 inch because I have super long arms. I also lengthened the bodice by 1 inch, and I didn't add anything to the skirt. So when you see the images that I'll put in, you will see just how long this skirt is. So just bear that in mind if you are not as tall as me. I have only added 1 inch to the bodice, nothing to the pattern pieces on the skirt. I just held them against me and I thought, yeah, these are going to be actually the right length, and it is super long. So that is something just to watch out for. Now, I ended up removing some width in the waist, because I mentioned obviously that this is designed to be very fitted around the bodice, but I deliberately wanted it a bit looser, and you can see that I have a fair bit of room around the bust, which is exactly what I wanted. I wanted it fairly relaxed. But the waist, when I put the zip in, when I basted the zip in and tried it on, I found that the waist was just far too big. So I mean, even now there is still plenty of room in there, but it's nipped in enough for me. I think maybe I could have just taken in another ½ inch, I don't know, but I feel that adding that 1 inch to the waist has probably been just a slight bit too much, because if I stand and pull the dress down where the length of the bodice is, you know, fully at its full stretch, if that makes sense. The waist is hitting more, is starting to hit me on my high hip. My hip bones are here and my actual waist is there. So when I sort of shrug a bit, I guess, and let it sort of sit where it wants to sit, you can see I've got a little bit of pooling of fabric here. And I think that actually the length of the bodice is probably now a bit too long, which is very unusual for me because normally most bodices I do lengthen by an inch. But as I say, I haven't got a lot of experience with Vogue patterns. I've not made many, and I didn't measure the pattern piece. I just went with this for the first time. And I think, yeah, in hindsight, I probably should take out about ½ inch and just add ½ inch onto the length of the bodice for future iterations of this pattern. So, you know, there's a couple of little adjustments I think that I would still need to make, a couple of little tweaks I think to get this perfect, but otherwise I'm really, really happy with how this has turned out. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Now, when I was making it and I was putting it on my mannequin, when I'd done certain steps, and I didn't try this on until literally I got to the point where I was basting the zip in. But I was seeing it on the mannequin and I was not falling in love with it. And I think sometimes we do that, don't we? Sometimes we make things and until we actually get it properly tried on and, you know, we sort of get the feel for how it feels and how it fits, I think that sometimes is the point where you really think, oh yeah, this is nice. But yeah, I had it on my mannequin and I was not loving how it was looking. I was starting to think I've made a massive mistake with this. It's looking very OTT, very, I don't know, very dressy, I guess. And I wanted to end up with a dress that I could wear, obviously not when I'm just slobbing about the house, but, you know, say if I'm going out for the afternoon and just going around the shops or, I don't know, that kind of thing in summer, just that I can wear day to day like that. And I was really worried that this was going to be a dress that was going to be really, really too dressy for that vibe. And it would just end up sitting in my wardrobe and not get worn. And that was a real concern. But I must say, when I'd finished it and I tried it on and I showed my husband, I was like, this is just gorgeous. I love it. It doesn't feel too dressy at all. It feels like, yeah, I can wear this with sandals, put my shades on, go for a walk, that kind of thing. And, you know, for a lunch date or whatever, it's just going to be super wearable like that. So I can take it on holiday with me. And because I've got like the covered up arms to the sleeves, because I am always super cold, even when it's really hot, there's going to be so many opportunities weather-wise that we get in the UK that I'm going to be able to wear this. And I just think it hits the brief that I was looking for. So I am absolutely over the moon with this pattern. I'm really enjoying exploring the big four patterns again and trying to sort of use my creative imagination, I guess, with experimenting with different styles and different fabrics and pairings and all that kind of thing. And I'm really enjoying that process. So that's my review of this dress, I think. Let me know what you think. I know that this kind of style really, really suits me because my waist, I'm pear-shaped and my waist is my smallest part. And, you know, my hips are like 16 inches, more or less, bigger than my bust. So I'm very, very pear-shaped. And I know that this kind of style really, really suits me because the attention is sort of around my waist and upper body, and the, you know, because it's nipped in there and then it all just falls away over my widest part with lots of volume there, I guess. It just hides those parts, and it just proportionally, I think, makes me look more in proportion, I guess. So I'm really, really happy with how this turns out. I think it really feels good on, and I feel like I've got my own Farm Rio dress at a fraction of the price. Let me know what you think. As I say, there are other versions of this in my head already. I don't think I've got any more fabric, particularly for this dress, that would work currently to give me that particular aesthetic that I'd be looking for. But while I was looking to see if they still had this fabric on the Lady McElroy site, I have seen some of the other Vienna lawns in other patterns and prints that I think would work so well to get that aesthetic. So yeah, I'm excited to probably revisit this at some point. But let me know what you think anyway. I would be really keen to hear from you. Do you think I've hit the brief or have I completely missed it? But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this review of this pattern, and I will be back with you soon. Take care. Bye.